Blood splatters, gore, throwbacks to old 40s horror flicks, restrained, tonally appropriate humor.
I'll be rotting for you.
Oh, and the wonderful use of practical effects for its werewolf.
Much better than these practical effects. I actually use this in one of my earlier films. Okay, I'm taking this off now.
Werewolf by Night is truly a new beast in the MCU, but I think we can all agree on what the best part of that special presentation was.
Ted?
Werewolf by Night definitely feels like a step, perhaps even a leap, into a new era for the MCU. A while ago, I made a video outlining what I hoped we would get out of a Werewolf by Night show, and I'll be the first to admit that the special presentation didn't go quite as far as I'd hoped it would, and it definitely has its flaws, but yeah, I think it's one of the best things to come out of Marvel Phase 4, and I'm probably not the only one. I know I'm not the only one saying that. I mean, truly, it's right up there with Loki and WandaVision for me, and better still, it demonstrates that horror and supernatural and the occult can be played up in the MCU, moving us closer and closer to projects like Blade and hopefully a very moody, dark, and violent Midnight Suns movie. But rather than do a lengthy review of all the different aspects of Werewolf by Night that were great, they got right, like the performances and editing and the score, and also not focusing too much on the flaws, like an unremarkable set of antagonists and a sort of anticlimactic, abrupt ending. Instead, I want to focus on what happened behind the scenes that resulted in one of the most unusual and welcome entries in this new wave of Marvel. And what am I talking about? Well, what's the first thing that anyone and everyone probably noticed about Werewolf by Night when the trailer hit? With the exception of WandaVision's handful of early episodes, black and white stylized color grading is not something we've seen in the MCU. It is arguably the central novelty of the special presentation, considering the fact that director Michael Giachinno aimed to evoke and pay homage to 40s monster movies and the Rod Serling approach to storytelling. You'd assume Werewolf by Night was always going to be in black and white, maybe even literally shot in black and white and on film. But it wasn't. Now you see, according to Giachinno, who by the way is the composer behind the MCU fanfare music, aka the logo music, and the composer for many films like Up and Batman and The Incredibles, and he also composed the score for Werewolf by Night. According to him, he had to fight hard to sell Kevin Feige on the idea that Werewolf by Night should be black and white. That fight took him so far and so long that the special presentation was actually shot in color and planned to be in color, not in black and white. Feige and presumably other higher-ups in Marvel were apparently skeptical of an entire project in black and white, and so Giachinno had to go all the way through production with his key stylization plan for the eventual edit as a no-go from the studio. But along the way, he says he continued to monitor his camera work to make sure that the final product would still look good in black and white. And it wasn't until somewhere around the third cut of the film in post-production that Feige finally agreed that Giacchino's vision of a black and white film was the way to go. In discussing the show, Giacchino said, quote, "I felt like if we were going to do something new in the Marvel Universe, let's really do something different and bold. And that, film friends, is exactly why I'm keying in on this specific element and the story around it." We've all heard the complaint that Marvel films are formulaic. And while I personally take issue with that judgment, think it's oversimplistic and often used as a cop-out, a generic blanket critique that doesn't often have real meaning, the fact is, many people do feel this way. And there is a grain of truth there. Marvel Studios is, after all, a single studio that has largely focused its creative vision through the lens of one architect. And while I do think Kevin Feige is a genius in his own right, creating a singular, cohesive universe has meant that he and the studio create each and every project with a set range of stylistic possibilities. Story beats, characters, and genres can vary wildly, but the palette used to paint the picture, if you will, has largely been the same palette. Infinite combinations, and yet one unifying, distinguishing feel. For years now, the MCU has been a filmmaking anomaly, where the producers, instead of directors, are calling the shots on creative and stylistic elements that make it to the final cut. This has meant that those more personal, creative choices that directors themselves might take don't always make it into the film. And while I don't think it's formulaic, because there are plenty of nuances and genre shifts and variations in the narrative beats, it does mean that you can often tell from the feel of a film that it's a Marvel film. Until now. Until this one. If you were to cut the first few seconds of the opening narration from Werewolf by Night, just remove the part with the drawing of the OG Avengers,
The known universe, with its heroes and marvels.
and then set someone down to watch it without letting them know this was a Marvel project, they would probably not guess they were watching an MCU flick. And I think that's a good thing. Now don't get me wrong, the interconnectedness of the MCU is one of my favorite things about it. Following the MCU narrative is like following comic book narratives themselves. I do hope and strongly believe the MCU will become more interconnected again as phases 5 and 6 hit. Rather, my point that I want to drive home here is that Werewolf by Night really works and opens new doors for the MCU because Feige and the studio let a creative director execute his vision as fully as possible. It was reluctant, but they let him take a big, bold chance on the stylization of this film, and it paid off big. My hope now is that Feige and company truly see that the best way to move forward and shake the stigma of formula is to let directors execute their visions as fully as possible. And in this way, Giachinno will have used a black and white film to bring more color to the MCU. So yeah, Werewolf by Night was awesome. From style to substance, and I believe it's going to help set Marvel on a more diversified, interesting path in the MCU. I hope we get more bold visual choices, more horror, and most importantly, more Man-Thing going forward in the MCU.
Oh, thanks, Ted.
Obviously, I focused on one key aspect of Werewolf by Night here, but what did you guys think of the special presentation? From the graveyard humor to the practical effects, better than my practical effects, to the performances, what was your favorite part? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, if you're in the mood for more spooky horror goodness, check out this link here to one of my favorite short horror films I've personally made, Bump in the Night. No werewolves, but it's a fun time. But if you'd like some more dark, stylized superhero content, specifically, click over here to watch my Joker fan film, The Last Laugh. Also, a good time, but not many real laughs. Either way, thanks for watching, film friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Cut.